Okay, everyone, we are totally switching gears after yesterday's quiz, and now instead of investing money, we are going to switch over and start talking about borrowing money. Now, we call this the loan unit in the loan process, but you borrow money a lot more frequently than you might think. If you take out a loan to buy a car, that's an obvious way of borrowing money. A mortgage to buy a house is just a loan to buy a house with. College, you take out student loans, right? All things you're familiar with. But there's other ways that you might borrow money too. Even a credit card. If you swipe a credit card and pay it off later, you're essentially borrowing money. So there's a lot of different ways to borrow money. We'll talk about just about every one of them. But today's date is Thursday, 11/18. And today, like I said, we're going to start off by exploring the loan process, and eventually we'll get to estimating monthly payments. So loans begin with what we call a promissory note. And that's technical legal jargon, and you can see the word promise is at the beginning of that word. It's just a promise to pay back. It's a legal promise to pay back. You will come across that word if you sign any student loan documents in, say, the next year or so. You'll come across a promissory note. And it just says that I promise to pay it back, and then in addition to that, there's all the terms. I will pay it back by this date, this often, at this interest rate. All the terms are in there. Now, if you don't have established credit, and we'll talk about credit score more down the road, probably tomorrow. But essentially, once you've been an adult for a longer time and you have more of an income, a better job, higher pay, and you've had a history of borrowing money and paying it back on time, after you've established that over a period of time, you'll have a better credit score. You'll have a good reputation of borrowing money. But until then, sometimes there's adults that have a bad history of paying back and they have a bad credit score. But unfortunately, when you're 18 years old, you don't have a great credit score because you haven't borrowed money yet. You haven't done anything wrong yet. You just haven't proven to anybody that you can make money consistently or pay money back consistently yet. So you have to establish your credit. And one way of doing that is getting a cosigner, which is essentially an adult who does have good credit who also signs that loan with you. So a cosigner kind of like goes in the deal with you, and it's somebody with established credit who takes responsibility for the debtor, which is the person borrowing, if they don't pay. So when I was just about your age, I wanted to buy a car. The bank wouldn't give me a loan because I didn't have a great job. I probably could have paid it back, and I did, but it was too big of a risk for the bank to lend me money. So my much older brother, who had a good job and a good credit score, signed the loan with me. And he took I still paid it every month, but he would have been legally responsible had I not paid it. So he would have been mad at me because he would have gotten the bill, but the bank would have been cool with that because somebody was going to pay it, and that's all they care about. And then at the end of that loan, I actually had a better credit score because the loan was in my name and it was paid off. He was my backup plan. I didn't need him, but then it gained credit for me. So that's basically what a cosigner is. And that'll come up more when we talk about credit score. Now, life insurance doesn't seem like it has too much to do with loans, but there's a couple of ways where it is related. So, for example, if you have a life insurance policy, and it's that pays your estate and pays your debt and pays your beneficiaries if you ever die, the bank is more willing to lend you money because if by chance you're not around anymore to pay them back, your life insurance policy will pay them back. So if you have any debt, if anything were to happen, and you had life insurance, it'll pay off your debt first. So to a banker, someone who works at a bank, that's good. You're less of a risk because they'll get paid even if something happens to you. So that's why we brought up life insurance here. Now, prepayment penalty you have to look out for. It's not as common anymore, but sometimes a bank will actually charge you a large fee if you pay back the loan too early. That doesn't seem like it makes sense, right? Wouldn't they want, if someone borrowed money from you and they wanted to pay you back early, why would you ever say no? Well, in the case of a bank, they are charging you interest, and interest, accumulates over time, as we learned with the formulas that we did. So they want you to keep that money coming in. They want you to keep that money borrowed so that you keep paying back, because every payment has interest in it. So sometimes they might charge you a fee if you do pay it back too early. It's in the terms of the loan. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they say, you know what, just give me your money because I'm just going to turn around and lend it back out again. But it is something you need to know about. Another vocabulary word, wage garnishment. So if you had some sort of debt, and it could be a loan, it could be other things, and you don't pay it back, and then you get sued in the courts, a judge could order that money be automatically taken from your paycheck until the debt is paid off. It's called garnishing your wages. So if I had a loan that I just refused to pay back, but I did have a job and I was sued for that money, they could go to my employer, and legally my employer must give them money before they give me my money. So they find a way to intercept your paychecks if in fact you do have a job but haven't paid them back. But that's after a whole court process. That doesn't happen right away. And then there's something called a balloon payment. And this will definitely come into play as we talk about different ways to borrow money and different ways that loans are marketed at people to make them look more attractive and look cheaper to pay back. But a balloon payment is the last and final payment that's much larger than the other payments. The key is it's much larger. It's the last one. So if you have to pay back a loan over 3 years every month, that would be 36 payments? In that case, the 36th payment in that example would be bigger, way bigger than all the other ones. And what that does is when you divide out the money, it allows for the first 35 payments to be lower, which people see as more attractive. They kick the can down the road and they say, I'll worry about that later. I'll figure out a way to pay that last one back. Or even worse, they don't even notice and they think that the lower payment's just going to be the payment forever. But in exchange for lower payments early on, the last payment is much larger. It's ballooned up. It blows up like a balloon, which is why they call it that. All right, very colorful mess here. What we have is 4 examples of places where you might borrow money from, and a little bit of a comparison of them. If you're typing these notes on Google Doc, remember yours go horizontally in a chart. If you're writing them, they look like this, but you'll certainly be able to tell the difference. So a regular old bank, right? Trustco Bank, HSBC Bank, Citizens Bank, typical banks. It's the most common place to borrow money. That's the first trait that banks have. When you think of borrowing money, you go to the bank. In order to borrow money from a bank, you absolutely have to have good credit, especially if you want a decent interest rate. A bank, you're just a stranger to a bank. So they have to look up your reputation, which is your credit score. And they say, you know what? Okay, you've had a good reputation paying people back. You make a good amount of money. Sure, we'll lend you money. And banks have a lot of money available to loan. Especially now when banks buy other banks, they become these mega banks that are nationwide. The pool of money is pretty big, so they do have a lot of money to loan. Now, almost like a bank and almost hard to tell the difference is a credit union. And we have a lot around here. They're popular. Capcom, CEFCU. There's a couple that, in fact, Capcom's headquarters are right around the corner from the high school. Credit unions are very similar to banks from the outside, but they have members rather than public. Now, lots of people can become members to a credit union. It's not that exclusive, but they do operate on a membership basis rather than just an open public store. They sometimes have lower interest rates because they have less risk. And especially when they first started, For example, SEFCU, I don't know if you know, it's SEFCU, and the SE stands for State Employees Federal Credit Union. So back when they started, you had to be a state employee, which kind of put you in a club. If you were a state employee, what did you definitely have? A job, because you couldn't be a state employee if you didn't have that job. So they knew you had an income, thus you were a member and you had less risk. Now they've opened it up to more people. You don't have to be a state employee to be a member of. They have more trades like banks now, but that was the origin of credit unions. Life insurance. You can, if you have a whole life insurance policy, you're paying into it your whole life. And it builds up value so that if and when you were to pass away, somebody gets all the money that was invested in it. But you can also borrow back your own money that was in the life insurance policy. It's gaining interest, but 20 years in, if you wanted to borrow some of that back, you can do that. And because it's your own money, right, you were putting it in there, it's a really low rate because they don't have anything to lose really because it was your money to begin with. If you don't pay it back, it just comes off whatever your policy would have paid off at the end. So if you had $1 million life insurance policy and you borrowed $100,000 of it at some point, and then you passed away and somebody cashed in your policy, they wouldn't get, and you never paid the loan back, it would just come off of the $1 million. So you can borrow against your own life insurance policy. Totally different idea is pawn shops. And several years ago, there was a TV show that a lot of people knew about called Pawn Stars, and it was kind of highlighted what pawn shops were all about. You can take a small, quick loan from a pawn shop. If you need to borrow money quickly, maybe you don't have good credit, if you need to pay a bill real quick, you could borrow it, but you have to, they don't know who you are, they don't care about your credit, they don't care about your income. But if you want to borrow money, you have to give them collateral. And collateral is usually an item of value. You might give them a gold watch, you might give them sometimes a car in some cases. You might give them something, you bring something in that has a lot of value that isn't cash, and they'll look at it and they're trained in these things and they say, okay, this thing's worth about $2,000. So you want to borrow $1,000 from us? Sure. You don't pay us back, we keep the item and we'll just sell it and make money. So, and like I said, if you wanted to borrow $1,000 and your item was worth $2,000, that's how they make money. Because if you don't pay them back, they're going to cash in double what it was worth, and they're going to charge you a high interest rate because you really don't have any leverage. So the last thing at the bottom here is not a real place to borrow money. It happens, or there's evidence of it happening, but it's completely illegal. But it's what they call loan sharking. It's totally illegal. It's not a bona fide business. They're not legal. It's an underground thing. And it's for very, very desperate situations. If people can't even go to a pawn shop, they certainly couldn't get money from a bank or a credit union. They owe somebody money. They need to get it right away. It's kind of a dangerous situation. So they find this loan shark and they'll charge them ridiculous amounts of interest, which is not even fair, but you don't have a choice. They feel they don't have a choice. And if you don't pay them back, there's no legal process to go through, so they handle it themselves, and that's why it's dangerous and illegal. So it's just something that developed in our society, but it's completely dangerous and illegal. That's what loan sharking is. So this is the beginning, kind of a quick day of notes. Tomorrow we get into paying back the loan, which usually you do monthly, and we call that the monthly loan payment. There's a formula for that. And if you borrow money for a personal loan, a car, college, whatever it is, you're going to see the same formula pop up throughout the year as we talk about different loans. So that's tomorrow, and we'll get into some more vocabulary, like I said, credit score, and the whole loan process will be taken a little bit further. But this was the intro.